Welcome to the initial broadcast of What Happened on Saturday with Marlon Kerner. My name is Josh Cormier, a former coaching assistant with the Buffalo Bills. I am in the shadow of Touchdown Jesus in my own basement, and I am privileged to be joined by former Ohio State Buckeye and Buffalo Bill Marlon Kerner. Marlon, how you doing?
I'm doing well. I'm just so excited to be talking about college football, something that's different and probably needed in Bill's country. So looking forward to just having some fun conversations and telling some fun stories about my own experiences of Division I football.
Absolutely. So, Marlon and I have become friends over the past year talking Bills football and through our mutual acquaintance, Don Purdy, who I do the If the Walls Could Talk in Buffalo podcast with. And, I reached out to Marlon and I thought, what a great idea to kind of expand for the Cover One audience a little bit more on college football, a passion of that he and I both share. And Marlon had, an amazing D1 college career at an ultra talented Ohio State team in the 90s, played with amazing teammates, played against, Hall of Famers, first round draft picks, Super Bowl champions, national champions, etc. So we're gonna do things a little bit differently here, and we're gonna have fun telling stories. We're gonna mirror the Ohio State and Notre Dame seasons. Let's not forget that, even though the background is scarlet and gray, and I think some of our guests will be as well. And Marlon's agreed to humor me on my Notre Dame passion, which maybe I'll explain to the audience later on. But let's start here, Marlon. Why the podcast? Why now? And then maybe you could remind people of your journey from high school days all the way to today.
Sure. So why this show? Why this topic? It's something that I love. I love college football. Probably I might even give watching college football a nod over how much I love watching professional football. I think for me, growing up, I understood that when you look at the college football season, like one loss could be detrimental. So every game matters. That you see the passion that goes along into it, and then having gone to Ohio State and gone played at some of those large stadiums and seeing how ruckus the crowd can get, and the paints. And I mean, if you've ever been to an Ohio State game, like you'll walk in, you'll see people with the block goals tattooed here, Buckeye leaves here, half scarlet, half gray faces. So just that atmosphere, just trying to bring that type of experience and help people see what it's like to go and play at a stadium where you have hundreds of thousands of people cheering for you on any given Saturday. And then you go to the pro ranks, and the stadiums are smaller by design, but it's just a totally different experience. And Buffalo is probably as close to a college experience that you'll get as a pro team. And so it's just wanting to show people a different side of what it looks like and really just kind of showing what that experience is. And we have UB here. So that's the closest that we're going to have to a Division I school. And it's not the same. So helping people understand where UB fits into that spectrum, and then giving people another perspective and how our favorite Bills players, the schools they come from, how they get here, what their experiences might be, help shedding light on that.
Let's do a quick tutorial or a couple quick questions about Ohio State itself. What's a Buckeye?
A Buckeye is actually realistically, it's a poisonous nut. It grows on a
Okay.
Buckeye tree. So if you eat it, you'll die. If you eat too many, you'll die. But we make them with peanut butter and chocolate. So if you eat those, as long as you're not allergic to peanut butter, you're going to love a Buckeye. So that is a Buckeye.
How did you earn one of the stickers on your helmet? Like a
So you
Buckeye
had to
sticker?
make a good play. So when we did them, you had to do so when you played on offense, defense, special teams, they would grade you out. So you talk about your plus minuses in a game, any situation. So depending on how we graded, you would get a Buckeye leaf for how many plus minuses you might have if you made a big play, like if you get an interception, if you block a field goal, if you get a sack, if you score a touchdown, you might get an extra Buckeye leaf for that. And so it was hard to get them. But you had to make sure you played well. And if you didn't play well, you didn't get Buckeye leaves that week. So it takes a while to kind of get there. And that's my helmet from my senior year. We had some really good plays that year. We ended up being 9-4. So we didn't play up to the best of our potential. And we had some really close games. We didn't do some things well, but then we played some teams and did some really good things. And so that's how I got that helmet full of Buckeye leaves
You
behind
got
me.
quite a full helmet behind you there.
Yeah, I made some good plays and some not so good plays, and you just kind of that growth and that learning experience as an athlete. It was a lot to go through, and I'll definitely share some of those experiences, some of the lessons that I learned that senior year, because that was a very trying time for me that senior year. But I think I grew and I ended up learning how to play football and learning why I played football.
All right, so you've shared a little bit of this with me, but not the full story. So before we move forward, obviously you must have been a great high school player, track star. Why Ohio State? And tell me why not Notre Dame?
So I was a high school quarterback. So believe it or not, and this goes to the question people always ask: do you need to play little league football to make it to the NFL, or to even make it to play college football at the Division I level? And I am an example of somebody not playing little league football all the way through. Like, I didn't play organized football until the 8th grade, and it was more due to the fact that financially I came from a single parent home. I have a twin brother, and so we didn't have a lot of money. And we didn't have a vehicle. So it was very difficult for us to say, let's put him in little league football. So what I did was I went outside and I just worked on my craft. Like, I would watch the games, I would figure out how to do it. I would run routes. I would throw the football to myself. It didn't matter for me what the temperature was outside. It could be 100 degrees. And my mom, I remember so many times my mom would like, it's so hot, you shouldn't be outside. Mom, you think Jerry Rice is not outside practicing in this? I'm outside. I'm going outside. So I would go outside, and it didn't matter. 100 degrees by myself, whether my friends wanted to play. And as a kid coming up, I was very tunnel vision. I only wanted to practice football. That's all I did. I would practice throwing the football. I would practice making my fingers, like, pinky to pinky, catching the football. That's all I did. And then about the 8th grade, I played football. And I also met a good friend of mine. His name is Ron Cunningham. We called him Buster. And he loved basketball, and he would always get me to play basketball, and I sucked at basketball, like, because all I want to do is play football. And so he's like, you got to be well-rounded. Like, you need to play other sports. And so he was the first person who challenged me to play other sports. And so I did. And then I became a different athlete. And so that 1 year of playing football, I was a running back. And I remember going to the first time of my practice, and I put it in pads, and they're like, what position do you want to play? And I went to Gahanna Lincoln. Shout out to Gahanna Lincoln, the Gahanna Lincoln Lions. I went to the Little League football. And that was my first year, my first and only year to organized football. And I was a tailback. And so I remember getting there because I wasn't sure. I just knew I could run really fast. And so we got there, and we're running, and they're kind of looking at me, and we had to run sprints. And so I'm beating this entire team, like just flying by everybody, like 40-yard sprint. Okay, I know I'm going to win this sprint. Gone. I'm like, okay, I can do this. And then everybody was like, okay, you know what? Yeah, you're fast, but wait till there was a guy, and we became really good friends. His name was Pat Zill. And they were like, wait till Pat gets here. Like, yeah, you might be fast now, but you're not going to beat Pat. And so I'm very competitive by nature. And so these kids talking to me at 13 years old, telling me, wait till Pat gets here. They didn't know what they were unleashing on Pat's head because
Poor Pat, right?
The first thing that I was thinking, like, okay, when Pat get here, Pat is going to get smoked. There is no way I'm letting Pat beat me in any drill. Pat is going to always be second, no matter what I do. We take handoffs, I'm gonna do it better than Pat. If we have to run a certain play, I'm gonna do it better than Pat, because everybody was challenging me, like, yeah, okay, you're better than us, you're faster than us, but you're not gonna beat Pat. So I couldn't wait until Pat got there, and Pat was off the entire first week. His family was out on vacation, but he was the man. He was the guy that everybody's like, yo, wait till Pat gets here. This is my first year. I don't know anything about organized football. I'm trying to figure out, like, how do you take the handoff right? So we get there, and I couldn't wait. Like, we're getting there, and Pat took all the first team reps. He did all the things. I'm like, okay, I'm waiting for it. And as soon as we light up for 40s, that was it. As soon as he blew that whistle, I took off. Like, that was it. Like, and ironically, their colors were blue and yellow. So I'm in this blue and yellow jersey, float, and I'm flying. And I tried to make sure in a 40-yard sprint, I was trying to beat him by at least a yard. And it was nonstop. Every time we lined up, it didn't matter. He was going to lose. And I'm pretty certain he lost. To my recollection, Pat might say that's not the case.
Yeah.
But I'm pretty certain in my mind, he lost every 40. There was no way I was going to let him win it. And so that kind of started my competitive nature. And we ended up, we didn't have that much success that year. So it was kind of interesting just to kind of watch it. He ended up being a fullback. I ended up being a tailback. We ended up kind of learning how to play with each other, and we became really good friends. And then we split. He went to Gahanna Lincoln. I went to Brookhaven High School in Columbus. So totally different area. And first thing I was going to do was play tailback. And I was like, I'm a running back. That's it. And so we get to the drill. We had some really good talent coming up. And we had a guy named Wilbert Brown who was all world in Columbus. He rushed for over 5,000 yards, like 50 or 60 touchdowns. He was really good. So I looked at that and I said, there's too many tailbacks here. but I can also throw a football because I had been practicing it since I was a kid. So I switched to quarterback. And so that started my quarterback journey. And then the rest is history. I just started learning how to play the position, ended up starting as a quarterback about halfway through the season. My freshman year, finished that, started my sophomore year in JV. And then my junior year, there was some question of should I have been a starter my sophomore year. And I won't go into why I didn't start. I like to say politics are involved. There's always boosters and things that go along into play. But
Yeah,
I think
let's talk a little Ohio football. Obviously Texas football, Texas high school football gets all the rub, all the national publicity, the movies, the TV show,
Right.
Friday Night Lights, the book. When I got hired to the football staff at the Bills, Coach Phillips, his first assignment for me was to read Friday Night Lights. Because Texas football, all that. He's like, you're gonna learn football one way or another, boy. So what are the differences like Ohio football? Is it 10 out of 10 with Texas football? Is it a little less intense? Is it more intense? Is it life?
It is life, like Texas football. There are towns in Columbus, well, actually in Ohio in itself, that actually they shut down on Friday night. So everybody closes at 5:30, 6 o'clock. Everybody comes out. They go to the football game at night. We played a team, I think my junior year in high school, where the entire town shut down. The bleachers were filled. And then they had a hill overlooking the stadium. And so all you saw were people on blankets. They had picnic baskets. They had lawn chairs. And they were all on this hill watching this football game. And so that was where you start realizing, like, wait a minute, like this is on a whole different level. Football is a way of life, just like it is in Texas. It's the same way in Ohio. When you're old enough and when you're born, especially if you're born in Columbus, you're going to get one or two things put into your crib. You're going to either basketball or football, right?
Yeah.
Sometimes people will put a baseball glove in there. But more importantly, most likely you're going to get a Ohio State football. You're going to get something that says, I was my first Ohio State football jersey. All of my kids had them. So when they were born, they all had that picture with it because football is a way of life. So when I grew up, I don't even remember when I liked football. I just knew from when I was about 4 years old that I wanted to play football, that I love playing football. It's just, that's the way of life. And that's what we do in Ohio is you like football. Now people are starting to branch out and do other sports. Soccer is now big. Lacrosse is one of those sports. Hockey, when I grew up, we didn't have hockey. It was either football first, basketball second, track and field third, and then baseball, kind of like that ranking of tied with third.
So when you're in high school and you're the starting quarterback for a Ohio, big time Columbus, Ohio, high school football team, what level of pressure did you feel? Like, was it similar to when you played in Ohio State? Was it similar to when you played for the Bills? No, it's
not even the same. Like for us, so I grew up in the city league. So I grew up in Columbus City. So in Columbus, where I come up, and when I was playing football, we had about 14 or 15 city league schools that all played each other. So if you're comparing it to Buffalo, where we are now, that would be like Burgard. That would be McKinley. That would be Cleve Hill. That would be those teams that play within the city. So we had a full interleague, inter-city school, and we had a city league. So we had a north and a south. We had all these divisions. We played each other, and we had a full schedule. So we would play 11 games. So I think that was one of the biggest differences of when I moved here to Buffalo and saw how different football is here in Western New York, as opposed to growing up in Ohio. We played a full 11 game schedule. And then you had playoffs or you had your championship, whatever that was going to be. So growing up in Columbus, you understood that in order to make the playoffs, we had a computer system. So they had rankings. So you wanted to play teams that were good. And so teams didn't want to play in the city league because if you lost, you didn't get enough computer rankings for them to justify why they would want to play us. So you had to just start being really good. So we were pretty good coming up. We had some really good teams, and we won some city league championships. And so my junior years, when I started full time for the first season, and we ended up going 10-2, and we won the city league division, and we won the championship. And so we came back our senior year, and we had to play at school that was DeSales. That was our first Catholic school that we wanted to play, and they were literally a block down the road from us. So we were on Carl Road in Columbus, Ohio. My high school is now closed, but DeSales is a Catholic high school, and it is literally a block away from us, and they're still open. And so that was like the first rivalry that we got to play. We played on my junior year, and we lost. We played on my senior year, and we lost. I hate to say it. But one of the ties that comes into that is Luke Fickell, who is now the head coach at Wisconsin and ended up being one of my teammates at the Ohio State University, as I have to throw that in.
Sure.
We played against him in high school. So that was kind of one of those things where we just had so much talent. And depending on where you decided to go, you would come across somebody who eventually ended up going and playing football at Ohio State.
Now, you told me you had a receiver that anybody who's going to listen to the show will obviously know their name. Tell me about throwing to Terry Glenn.
So I grew up and played football with Terry Glenn. So being a high school quarterback, Terry blossomed. Terry was a year behind me. So my junior year, he was a sophomore. So he was still trying to figure it out, still growing into his body, but he was really fast. And so by the time my senior year came along, he was a guy like, we've got to get him on the field. And he made some unbelievable catches. I remember we played a school called Beechcroft that we beat them a lot. So anybody that went to Beechcroft that might be listening, sorry. But he made a catch. He just jumped over somebody. He did a Randy Moss catch on somebody in high school before Randy Moss was even playing in the NFL and mossing people. So he was the first person that mossed somebody in high school that I saw. He was just a phenomenal athlete, and he really blossomed the following year when he became the man. And he was just a guy that just was super fast. All of us, we ended up running track because our football coach was also a track coach. So that's how we ended up getting roped into track. So that's why I love running track as well. But Terry was just a phenomenal athlete. And then we got to go and play with each other in college and then eventually played against each other in the NFL. So it was one of those journeys where you really just get to watch, like, man, like we were 15, 16-year-old kids talking about, I hope I get the opportunity to play college football. Then we got to play college football with each other. And we're like, I hope I get drafted and just make it to the NFL. And then we're talking to each other. And it's one of those, normally you like to jaw against receivers or maybe talk trash. Like our trash talking wasn't trash talking. It was, oh my gosh, can you believe we were kids dreaming about this? Like, can you believe we were talking about this on the football field when we were 15, 16 about what I'm going to do when I get to the NFL? And now I'm guarding you not only in college, I got to guard you now in the NFL. So it was one of those just really cool, surreal moments. And so I remember my first year we played him, he got the better of me and I had to go back and like, I need to get better. I got to work on this. I got to work on that. And so we're in the game. He's like, man, Kern, because that was my nickname in high school. Everybody called me Kern. Okay. So he's like, I can't believe how much better you got. Like, I can't believe you're doing this, you're doing that. Like, this is pretty amazing. And so it's just one of those really surreal moments where you're just kind of like, oh my gosh, like the growth, the maturity, like what we've been able to accomplish. And we've been doing it alongside each other and watching each other's growth over this course of our entire lifetime. And then, you know, unfortunately, where everything just happened to him now and his untimely demise. But I'll never forget just us, just football, just kind of growing up when it was at its purest form. And we were just trying to figure out how we get to the next level and get out of our own environments.
You guys grew up together and, ended up in an amazing spot. Who got the better of the reps in the NFL?
I will say, I think the last game that we played them, they got the better of the score. I think there were moments when I made plays. I'll take the diplomatic. I made plays against him at times, and then he made some really good plays against me at times. And I think that was the fun part. It was not one of those where, oh my gosh, it's Terry Glenn, where somebody else might be like, oh my gosh, he's this, he's that. I was just like, this is Terry. I know Terry. Like, so I was never afraid of what this was happening or this person is this, or he has this aura about him. It was, this is Terry. I've known Terry since I was 15, 16 years old. So I know what he does well. I know how he wants to run this route. I know where I need to be to get him. And then we're going to see mano a mano who wins. And he won some plays. I think there was one time I tried to come underneath the ball and Drew Bledsoe threw the ball high. He went up and got it because he was an amazing leaper, which a lot of people don't know that about Terry. He had a really good vertical, like a 30-inch vertical coming out of college. So I came low knowing that if he throws the ball low, I'm going to knock it out. He went high, made a great catch. But then Drew Bledsoe threw a deep ball, and I knew where the ball was going to be, and I knew I could run with him. So it was just meet him where the ball is going to be, and I broke up that pass. So it was one of those just fun moments of trying to understand where the ball is going to be, understanding your keys, understanding how you're supposed to play in the scheme of the defense. And so it was a lot of fun just going up against him.
That's amazing. So you, Terry, probably some of your better high school teammates, what does it feel like to know like that you're just like the best athletes on the field? Like when you like in high school, and then obviously you're starting to probably get recruited, junior, senior year of high school. Like I've never experienced where I've been the best player on any field I've ever been on. So maybe you could talk to people of what it's like. It's not arrogance. It's just it's confidence, and you
Right.
put the work in, and you're athletic, and you know what you're doing. What does that feel like?
I think if the coach does it right, what the coach is able to do is make sure that you kind of help keep people's egos in check. So I think for one, you have to stay really grounded. You have to have some really good friends, right? Because it's really easy, especially now with social media and what's out there. And the fact that you have to promote yourself at all times to kind of get discovered, it's really easy to say, I'm this, right? You can beat your chest. We didn't have that growing up. So you knew you were good based off of the plays you were able to make on the field and the amount of playing time that sometimes the coach might give you. So for that, it was kind of like there was a hierarchy. So I grew up, we kind of ran a wing T style offense. So it wasn't like I was going to come back and throw for 3,000 yards in a season, which had been a lot back in the 90s. I'm sorry, I'm
Yeah.
dating myself. Yes, I'm old. So when you think about that, like I can think of my senior year, I led the team in rushing touchdowns. I rushed for 17 touchdowns my senior year, but I also had two 1,000-yard rushers that also had double-digit touchdowns. So it goes to show you how good we were on the ground. And I only threw for like 8 touchdowns because we were so potent when we handed the ball off. Like we could get yards in chunks. And so it's just kind of understanding where you fit and how you play it, and the scheme of the offense that we're in. So a guy like Terry wasn't going to be recruited as this great receiver coming out because we didn't throw the ball a whole lot. And so I knew I wasn't going to go to Ohio State and play quarterback because we didn't throw the ball enough. We didn't throw the ball 30 times a game. That was never our game. We might throw the ball 10 times most, and that's a lot for us. So understanding that, I think we had really good tailbacks that came out of there. Again, I mentioned Wilbur Brown, who was all everything. I think he still might have some records. I want to say he rushed for like 5,900 plus yards. And when you look at that, so coming out like I can't have an ego as this. So it's kind of like, okay, you're the man. And our coach did a really good job of making sure like, okay, your time is up. You're the leader. You have to lead this team. As a junior, I didn't have all that pressure put on me because I had other seniors that helped me understand and carry the load. And so that was kind of the fun part about just kind of coming into it. But I think there was an aha moment. So for anybody that's trying to figure out like, when do you decide you want to be in Division I football? It starts as a freshman, right? Like that's a mindset that I had early. I just didn't know what I needed to do to get to that level. And so I remember I was kind of sandbagging some drills. I was kind of like not running. I kind of wasn't taking the sprints and everything. And I remember my coach came to me and said, listen, he's like, if you want to be the man, then you have to be the man. And I was like, well, what does that mean? He's like, so, if you say you're the best player, then you have to excel at everything. Like there should never be anybody that beats you in the drill. There should never be anybody that outcompetes you. If you say you're the fastest, then every sprint you run, you should be the first person there. Like if somebody's beating you, it should be a half a step. Like they got you because it was a slow start or they're just as fast as you. And so once I had that mentality shift of like, okay, if I'm supposed to be the man and I want to get to the next level, then nobody's going to outwork me. Then that's where that took off. So then I understood like, oh, wait a minute. Like, okay, I need to be the man on this. And so if I'm gonna be the man, I have to show them the man in everything. It didn't matter what drill it was. I'm leading. I'm the first one out there. So as a quarterback, it didn't matter what drill it was. I'm the first one out there. I'm going to lead by example. And so I think that helped carry on and it helped get the mentality of, okay, now I know I can play at the next level. And then it's crazy because you're the man at high school and then you get to college and everybody was the man.
Right? I was gonna ask you that. So let's say your junior year and you start getting offers. Maybe tell people what it's like to get mail at your house from different colleges. How many colleges do you remember getting mail from? What was like maybe the craziest place you got recruited by? We're going to get into a bunch of your recruiting stories, kind of later on in the show and other episodes, but just a general overview of what it's like to get a letter from the University of Notre Dame, University of Alabama, University of Ohio State, like addressed to you as a junior in high school.
So as a junior, I think, so I started getting a couple letters, I want to say probably like right after the summer of my sophomore year, going into my junior year. And it's just because some of those college coaches come to games, they'll watch stuff, they kind of scout early. But it was like the local school. So it's your capital universities, your Howe universities, kind of like, hey, we heard you might be a good prospect. It's a generic, fill out this questionnaire. We'll be watching you. And so what ended up happening for me is I had a really good junior year. We ended up going 10-2. As I said, we lost one of our first games early. Then we ran off 10 straight games. 9 or 10 straight games, lost a game, and then went to the city championship and won that. And so it's kind of one of those things where you're like, oh, this is kind of a cool thing. And then I got recruited right after like the end of my junior year. I saw a huge bump into the number of letters I got. Started getting some of those Ohio teams, Mount Union, Joe Flacco school. So I got a lot of letters from them early, just because Ohio schools recruit Ohio schools, right?
Sure.
And so for me, it was when I took my SAT. So anybody that's listening, take your SATs and things early, right? That's the first thing you have to do to make sure you're going to go and teams can recruit you, because they want to make sure that they can take care of you in the classroom. So my mom, and we'll talk about some of these things in other episodes of why I did some of the things I did. But my mom had a rule of if I got anything less than a B, I couldn't play football. Ooh. So I was really good academically. I took care of what I needed to do in the class, even though, some people must say, well, it's a city league school. I've had some great teachers, which I'll share in some of the upcoming episodes of some of my favorite teachers and what they taught me and why that transition wasn't as difficult for me. But I passed my junior. I passed the SAT or the ACT my junior. I took my ACT because it was like, which one did you take first? There was no penalty for guessing. So I was like, let me take the ACT my junior year. So taking the spring of my junior year, got a 23, which I guess equates to like about probably in today's ACT, like a 26 or so, maybe a 27. And so I then became recruitable by all the schools, because I'm like, oh, wait a minute. You have a 3.5 GPA. You already passed your ACT. You're doing well in your classrooms. Let's start recruiting this guy. And
so the world kind of opened up to you.
The world opened up, and I went to Ohio State's football camp. So Ohio State was right in my backyard. Like I grew up in Columbus. I could go to Ohio State's football camp anytime. So I went my junior year, my junior year summer went there, and then my senior year I went there as well. So that opened up the recruiting flood. So I went from getting kind of local, and then it went to Ivy League. It went to all the military academies. It went to a few SEC schools. So I got letters from Tennessee, and then Ohio State because I was in their backyard. Notre Dame because I wanted to be the next Tony Rice.
And there you go.
There was all kind of things that passing the test really opened up the door for me, and so I really loved that. That was a really cool experience. And so I remember having a couple, like maybe 10 letters on the wall, and then all of a sudden, like just opening the mailbox, going to football and working out, and my coach handed me a stack of mails because back then, sometimes you couldn't get the students' letter or their address, so they would just mail it to the school and to your football coach. Your football coach would hand you a stack of letters, and so he would walk in like, "Hey, you got mail." I'm like, "Okay, cool." And it would just be like, "Hey, I think the farthest I got was UCLA." I had those, so it was kind of just a cool time to kind of figure out what it looks like. And obviously, you're flattered and just like, "Wow, this is amazing." Yes, I did get one letter from Michigan. No, I did not consider going to Michigan at all. It was one of those things like, nah.
Was Ohio State always the dream?
Ohio State was like 1A, 1B for me. So when I knew Ohio State was in the picture, because I grew up there, like I want to go to Ohio State. I always went to their games, but it wasn't one of those things where I was sure if I wanted to go play there, just because of the fact that I wanted to play quarterback. And I knew Ohio State, like 6'3" guys, like 215, 220, had the crazy strong arms. And that wasn't me. I'm like, all right, I'm 5'11" and a half, like on a good day with the right shoes, 6 foot. Right. So I ran a 4.4 40 coming out. And so I'm a fast guy. I'm an option guy. So I knew Notre Dame was the school that probably be the best for me. And then watching Tony Rice, watching them win the national championship and cheering for them and watching Rocky Ismail and those guys and Ricky Waters. I'm like, and Jerome Bettis. Like I knew that. Like I memorized their guys. Like Brown. I had it down. Yes. I was a Notre Dame fan. Like my freshman year, I wanted to go to Oklahoma, right?
Okay.
And then they got the death penalty, right? I'm like,
Oklahoma
for me. No Oklahoma for me. So I'm like, Notre Dame. Like I watched Notre Dame football too. So then when it came down to the recruiting process, it was just kind of that game of where should I go? And Notre Dame kind of played the recruiting game, and Ohio State didn't. Ohio State was very upfront. Coach Cooper was like, listen, we're rebuilding. We're trying to do some things. And I was recruited as a defensive back for Ohio State. Like, so I knew if I went there, I was going to switch positions and play corner. And it was something that I hadn't really done a lot yet. So I wasn't sure what that looked like for me and how much playing time I might get if I went there. So I was just kind of like, let me keep my options open. And then Notre Dame kind of played the game. Ohio State was like, you know what? We want you. I got a letter at least from them once a week. In Notre
Wow.
Dame, like every 10 days, I would get something like, hey, we want you. You're on our list. Here's this, here's that. And if I can find a picture, I'll send you a picture. I haven't had senior pictures with Notre Dame gear on.
Oh,
So everybody that
there's
knew me knew I was going to Notre Dame. Like they were surprised when I shocked when I said I'm going to Ohio State. But anybody that was in my circle kind of knew like, hey, Ohio State is definitely has a great shot of him going there. And after I took that visit and I kind of knew what it was like and I knew the atmosphere and I kind of got to meet some of the players there, I'm like, you know what? This is going to be more and more the place of where I should go. And I made that decision to commit to Ohio State. And ironically, the day I committed to Ohio State, I got a phone call about an hour later from Notre Dame saying, can you come in for a visit? I'm like, nope. I just committed to Ohio State and I'm going there.
That had to feel good in a way that, you know, the guys who really wanted you were the ones you committed to. We've had a lot of guests on the show, former players, you know, on If the Walls Could Talk in Buffalo, former Bills and all. Some guys really loved staying home for college. Jeff Burris left South Carolina to go to Notre Dame because it was so opposite of, you know, how he grew up and, you know, the atmosphere around football in South Carolina. Was it easy for you to be at home? Were there a lot of like those distractions about people wanting tickets and, you know, your mom and your dad and all that? Like was staying home for college? Obviously you love Ohio State. You had a great career, but like just a kid in college. Some people just want to go away and get away from all that.
Well, that was why Notre Dame was kind of one of the schools that I was looking at because I wanted to get away. Growing up in Columbus, you want to get out of Columbus. You want to kind of spread your wings. But luckily for me, my dad never was really there. So again, grew up in a single parent home. So I knew who my dad was, but he lived in California. So it wasn't one of those issues of that. It was more of my mom ended up meeting my stepdad and they've been married now for, I want to say 26, 25 plus years. But he was in the Air Force. And so when I was going through that process, she let me know, hey, we're going to get married. As soon as you graduate, I'm getting married. So literally, I graduated like June the 9th out of high school, and my mom got married like June 26th. And so they were going to Germany because my stepdad was stationed overseas. And so then I started going through that process. Okay, so does it make sense to even consider leaving Columbus, where I have some family and a support network, and then going to a school that I had no one. There's nobody there. If there's an issue, I don't have anybody I can call. And so that helped make the decision of why Ohio State was a little bit more, maybe a better fit. When I started looking at the big scheme of things, my mom left, my twin brother left. So it was just me. And I had my family still here. And so I knew that I had the campus, my bubble there on campus with my football brothers. But if I needed anything, I also had family that I could call. I could call my aunt who lived literally 10 minutes from the campus. So I could be like, hey, I need this or I need that, or hey, can you come get me? I need such and such. And so that really helped weigh into the decision of why Ohio State ended up being a better decision for me.
Yeah, that's really interesting. Like you kind of had the best of both worlds, right? Like, you know, God love your mom, God love my mom, but I was kind of ready to get away from my mom and my dad.
Right. I'm like, bye, mom.
Bye. Yeah, right.
She's like, you should come with me. That mom, that's not happening. Like,
but she's the one who left. Did you seriously consider any of the service academies?
For a minute, I did. Yeah, I considered Air Force. I remember getting that recruiting call from back in the force. Back in the day, Air Force had a really good quarterback named D. Dallas, and he was in the Heisman talk. And so I remember watching their offense and running how they watch how they run it. And I remember he called me. He was like, "Hey, this is D. Dallas." I'm like, "Oh, I know who you are. Like, I know exactly who you are." And so we had a really good conversation. But I had always wanted to go to the NFL. Like that was my dream to play in the NFL. And back then, you had this really crazy commitment of, I think it's now 2 years, but I want to say back when I was coming out, it might have been 3 or 4. And so it was a very long commitment of you couldn't go to the NFL. You had a service commitment that you had to fulfill. And so that was one of the biggest reasons as to why I said, you know, I was going to follow that process through. I'm like, why would I even kid myself? That's not even fair because I know I wouldn't even want that. If I became really good at football and I got to the level of where I think I can get, that's going to set me back, and I'm not even going to go that route. So I just decided not to follow that path. I considered some of the Ivy League schools again, but then it was like, okay, Ohio State, Notre Dame, like you can get the same quality education that way. So I was like, yeah, I'm good there. I'm going here. And Ohio State ended up being the final choice for me.
I think David Robinson was probably the only guy who was able to be, you know, kind of get that service commitment kind of commuted because he's future Hall of Famer. You'd have been a great option quarterback at any one of those service schools, though.
I would have loved it. It would have been fun, like to go to Navy and beat Notre Dame. Like, that
Oh,
would have been
well,
so
that's,
much fun.
ouch, ouch. Yeah, that was ouch. That was well played. So, as the show goes forward, we're going to continue to kind of monitor and follow with Marlon's journey here. I guess we'll kind of leave it there for your journey. Kind of deciding on Ohio State. We want to get into like what it was like on campus. All the rest. I think we're going to transition right now and kind of talk about the 2023 Buckeyes, and I'd like to week by week kind of have you share what it's like being an athlete, before week one. And then maybe some of the Big Ten schools that, Ohio State plays every year. We're going to mirror their schedule as we go. We're obviously going to talk about Notre Dame as well. We're going to talk about, the big picture college football. I know you're really excited for a game Thursday night that we can talk about before we go tonight. But I'm going to put up the schedule now for Ohio State for week one. Everybody can see. And, they open with the juggernaut of the Indiana Hoosiers at home, a perennial speed bump for the Buckeyes from what I've seen. What recollections do you have of playing Indiana, either home or away? And, just talk me through what it's like to open a college football season.
It's such a fun thing to do. And normally you don't see Ohio State open component. Generally, you try to get somebody like Western Kentucky that's on the schedule the following week, or a Youngstown State or a Bowling Green. You try to get some of those schools. But I think for scheduling purposes, you got Indiana. So ironically, as I shared some of those recruiting stories, Indiana was the first school that I took an official visit to. And so Bloomington was like the first place I went. It's out in the middle of nowhere. So I never lost a game to Indiana in my 4 years playing at Ohio State. We always played them. We beat them. Ohio State has, ironically, when you think about this matchup, when we talk about the tail of the tape, if you're going to be a boxer, right? Ohio State has a 28-game win streak against Indiana right now. They've won the last 10. They beat them last year, 56-14 at home. When they went to Indiana 2 years ago, they beat them 54-7. So it's not like Ohio State is fretting this right now. I think for Buckeye fans, what you want to think about for this game is you had some changeover, right? You lost some offensive linemen. You lost C.J. Stroud. You have a lot of weapons coming back. So what you're looking for is who's going to be starting quarterback. You're kind of, you have by September 23rd, you have a huge game coming up that we will talk about here in the coming weeks.
Yes, we will.
At Notre Dame. Yes, Notre Dame.
We will.
Right. And so when you look at this game, you're trying to come in and really kind of set who you are, set your identity as a football team. You're going to kind of show one that Travion Henderson is healthy. So you want to get him going. You got Mayan Williams back there. So you got a juggernaut backfield, and you're loaded with three guys that played a lot last year that you're going to be able to hand the ball to. Everybody, and Bills fans, if you are a Bills fan from back in the day, we all know who Marvin Harrison was when the Colts were in the AFC East division with us, and how they set all kind of records. They torched us. But his son is also a pretty good football player at the Ohio State University.
There's talk of him being like a top 2 pick next year. Him and
right.
Caleb Williams, like he's easily top 5 in the country right now.
Easily top 5. And so you have a lot of weapons. You have some incoming guys that play. You got there's so many weapons that Ohio State has. So one, what you're trying to do is figure out who's going to be the starting quarterback. That has not been decided. At least the last time I checked Twitter and looked at any Ohio State news, it hasn't been decided. I've been in those situations in my own experience of where some coaches will say, you know what, they just haven't separated from each other yet. So we're going to go with a 2 quarterback style of system and kind of give an opportunity to see if one separates against the bullets in live action. Because no matter how much you practice and go blitz tempo situations, you really can't simulate game speed. You just kind of have to see how people react in game situations. So I could see Ohio State coming into this game in the next few games after that, saying we're going to give them equal opportunity, kind of give them on a pitch count and see who does well, and see if you can get them in certain situations to kind of get them prepared for what they're going to face when they go to South Bend and play. So I can see that happening.
No coach would ever admit this, and you'll never get a player on record in an interview to admit this. This is almost like a 3-game preseason for Ohio State, right?
I wouldn't call it a preseason because those teams are going to come in and compete. I mean, but when you look at the talent level of what's there, if Ohio State takes care of business and actually focuses and says we're going to treat this the way and play the way we can play, they should win those games. There will be favorites. I want to say I think the line is Ohio State is 97% favored to win at Indiana, right? So if you go and take care of business, anything, you should win this game. But what you're trying to do is really kind of get into a rhythm, right? So whoever the quarterback's going to be, can you get into a rhythm? Can you get your receivers going? Can you get your run game going? Because you want to build confidence. You want to build continuity. You hear that term a lot in football. We just want to build continuity. And so you haven't been able really to do that. Sometimes you hold guys out of practice. Sometimes you kind of go back and just like, he's got dinged up and I want to see how it is. And some guys are just freshmen. They're coming freshmen. They haven't played at this level yet. So you want to get them the exposure that they need. So I'm looking forward to seeing what they do. And this is a good test. I'm a good Big Ten opponent, so it matters. So you're really going to take it serious because it matters in the division. It matters if you want to get to the goal of playing for the Big Ten championship. You need to win this game.
Does Indiana have any sort of home field advantage? I mean, I'm assuming it's probably, 50% Buckeye fans?
I mean, they'll have some people there. I mean, but yes, it's close enough for us to travel. Buckeye fans always travel well. So, you'll see a sea of red there. I mean, and they have their maroon or burgundy, whatever you want to call it. But I think this is a game where they know going into it that Ohio State should win this game. So, if you're the opposing coach, you're trying to talk and like, look, we're the underdog. Like, nobody expects us to win. The pressure's all on them. And that's what he's saying. That's what he's trying to get them to understand. Like, the pressure's on them. Like, if they can't figure it out, if their quarterback can't read the defense, we have a good shot. If we can keep it close, they get more and more tight. And so that's where you see some of those games early where it matters for teams. What do you want to try to get going? They want to get their offense moving. They just want to try to get scores. What you want when we talk about continuity early is I want to sustain drives. It's not one of those, I want home run, I want shots. I want to be able to string together a 10 play, a 12 play, a 15 play drive, because now that means I'm executing, and that's going to bode well for later in the season. And again, Ohio State has the athletes where they should be able to exploit some of those holes in the secondary that Indiana might have. They should have some running backs that can take and have home run speed and breakaway speed. So there's going to be opportunities where they can do that against Indiana. And then, they come back the following week at home. They have 2 home games in Youngstown State and Washington.
Yeah, a real gauntlet.
Western Kentucky. Yeah.
That's a real gauntlet. Yeah. So, just looking at the schedule, just a brief overview, Indiana, Youngstown State, Western Kentucky, obviously the big game against Notre Dame, then Maryland, Purdue, Penn State. If you're like when you were in college, did you guys do that's a win, that's a loss, or that's a tough game, not a loss, but do the players know, hey, you know what, if we line up and we play well, we're going to beat Youngstown State. We're going to beat Western Kentucky. Did you guys look ahead? I mean, you're college kids. How could you not?
We're college kids. There's a tendency to come in and look like, yeah, we should win this game. But then you also look at what we also like to do is like, okay, who from this is considered to be a prospect, a pro level prospect, because I want this measuring stick. So, if you're playing a team like we played Fresno State one year and Trent Dilfer was the quarterback, and you're like, okay, if we're going to play Trent Dilfer, all right, he's like a pro style quarterback. I want to make sure that I try to knock some passes down. I want to try to get interceptions. So you look at those things. You look at the schedule of what's the matchup? Who can I go? Who projected to possibly get drafted? Who's this person going here? Do they run a pro scheme? Like, how can I show that I can play against this person? How can I go and show that I'm better than this person to kind of solidify what I'm doing so that when I eventually say I want to go to the NFL, then can I do that? And so you kind of look at those matchups and like we don't like Michigan. We know that's the last game. You look at the Michigan State game. You look at that Penn State game. Those are games there's going to be a dogfight. So like I need to bring my A game. I need to be focused on those games. And so, you're always looking at those and how to match up, how I'm going to play, what's my mindset going to be, what is it going to look like, and you're watching the schedule for them too.
That's really interesting that you find individual matchups. It's like the old Michael Jordan thing, right? Like he would always find some motivation even against an inferior opponent. Maybe they didn't draft him, or maybe some dude looked at him the wrong way in the locker room or on the bus, or, right. 5 years ago something happened. So that's interesting that you would kind of use like Trent Dilfer as a measuring stick and to put on tape, for the NFL. I had never really thought of it that way. I think that's pretty interesting. On the flip side, Notre Dame this week, coming off a big win against Navy, the Sam Hartman Bowl, I'd like to call it, 4 touchdowns, great start to the season. They play Tennessee State, which is a significant game for Notre Dame. It's the first time that they've ever hosted an FCS opponent, and it's the first time they've ever hosted a historically black university. And the head coach is someone who obviously you're familiar with, in Eddie George. Maybe can you talk to us a little bit about Eddie George as a player and as a friend, and then, him as a coach?
As a coach, I'm not too familiar with him. I haven't spoken with him in a little while, but as a player, I just remember he was kind of quiet, kind of coming in. He went to a military school. So he kind of went to that prep school and then kind of came in early. to Ohio State. So highly touted coming out, big dude, 6'4", like 225, solid kid. Like, so you come and you look at him, and I just remember his work ethic. We were there, like we all worked hard. We used to have this 1,000-pound club that we would kind of come in, that you could get on a leaderboard. And so for us to be a part of the 1,000-pound club, you had to have, it was either bench press or squat, lunges, or hang clean. So that was kind of the 4 things you could do to be a part of the 1,000-pound club. Yes, I did get in the 1,000-pound club, nice. By the way. So we kind of looked at those things. And so I just remember Eddie going through, and we always had really good running backs at Ohio State. So from Carlos Snow to Robert Smith to Raymond Harris, to Butler Benote, guys that made it to some of those guys made it to the next level. Some guys didn't. And then Eddie Eddie was really good at abiding his time. And I just remember him one year, he kind of had a 2 fumble game that we ended up losing in Illinois. And I remember just the crowd going at it. And I remember him just being quiet, not saying too much about it. And then he came back the next year. He worked. I mean, he worked so hard. And so he turned that into a Heisman Trophy year, the following in 95, and then had a great pro career. And now he's the head coach. And I mean, just a guy who's going to have those guys in right, doing everything right. And I think that's the thing that I love about it. And so I love the fact that you have a Buckeye head coach who was able to connect with another former Buckeye who's the head coach in Notre Dame, and Freeman, and kind of saying, let's do some things. Let's get us on the schedule. Let's get these guys the exposure that they need. And again, it's not like it's going to be a dogfight. I think, going into it, Eddie knows that talent-wise, Notre Dame is going to be light years ahead of where Tennessee State is. But again, at the same thing, it's one of those things like, this is great exposure for the program, great exposure for him. And it's a measuring stick for the talent of guys so they can kind of see what it's like. Because the one thing I always tell people, when people ask me, like, what school should I go to? You go where you have the best opportunity, because the NFL will always find you. So it doesn't matter what school you went to. You can go to any school that there is. I mean, Division III, Division II, 1AA or FCS now. It doesn't matter. If you can play football, the NFL is going to find you. The only thing that matters is how you come into it. You might get drafted depending on what school and what division you went to. Or you may become an undrafted free agent. But it doesn't matter. If you have talent, you can play, you're going to have an opportunity. So just get there, and the rest will take care of itself.
We've interviewed, we're going to wrap up here in a minute. We've interviewed so many guys who played for the Bills on the Super Bowl teams. Don Beebe, Jamie Mueller went to some place called Benedictine in Kansas. And this is like the late 80s where they were still finding these guys. So you're right. Like, obviously with social media and every game's on TV now, if you can play, you can play. And they'll find you, because each NFL, team has how many scouts? God only knows, 20? Every scouting department. So they'll find you. That's really good advice that you give to a kid, that go play. Like, you'd probably rather be the starter on a team like that than fourth string at Ohio State in some ways, right?
Yes. And I think we'll talk about that in one of the episodes about the portal, and how it kind of changes things. But I mean, that's kind of the reason why I tell, like, man, it doesn't matter. Like, why be a walk-on if somebody wants you and they're at FCS or Division II? They still give out scholarships in Division II. You can still go to school for free at Division II schools and have the same exposure, and do some things. So it doesn't matter. Just go there and play and have the best opportunity to grow as a football player, and everything else will take care of itself.
We're gonna do 2 more things here before we wrap it up for episode 1. You told me you're kind of the game you're looking forward to the most. I'd like to basically highlight one game a week that's not Notre Dame or Ohio State. So you maybe tell people the game that you're looking forward to the most this week and why.
So I'm looking forward to seeing this SEC Pac-12 matchup that's actually going to be on ESPN on Thursday between the 14th ranked Utah Utes and the Florida Gators. So I just like to see that matchup. Utah, Pac-12 champion, knocked off USC last year, finished up with a 10-4 record. And so Florida, not so great of a record, but, I'm looking forward to just kind of seeing what that looks like. That's the game that stands out to me this week. Like, this could be interesting because Florida's not ranked. And you always hear about the SEC. And when you look at the top 25, I want to say there's like 5 or 6 teams right now that are in the Big Ten, that are in the SEC. So from the top 25 standpoint, you've got a lot of teams that represent those 2 conferences. So I'm just really looking forward to seeing. And I want to say there's like maybe 4 or 5 Pac-12 people in that as well. So it's gonna be fun to watch and just kind of see what it looks like. And it's on ESPN. It's that Thursday night game, kind of your can't miss TV, kind of kicks off that college football weekend. And I think it's going to be fantastic and see what Utah can do and if they can win it. And Florida's traveling on the road, and that's a tough environment. So I really want to see what Utah can do and if Florida can shake off that 6-7 record that they had last year.
It's kind of always fun to see the SEC schools actually like travel outside the southeast of the United States, right? Like, what's it? Alabama has some ridiculous stat where they have played like north of the Mason-Dixon line like 3 times in the last 20 years. Like, it's something crazy like that where they always seem to have everybody either come to them or play neutral site. So, I kind of applaud Florida for going to Utah. Utah's probably a tough place to play. And ironically enough, it's the Urban Meyer Bowl.
Yes, that is where Urban Meyer started there, went to Florida, and then went to Ohio State. So it's kind of that whole circle of Urban Meyer, the ties that binds all 3 schools. So it's going to be fun to watch. I can't wait as a Buckeye fan. And ironically, I'll give a shameless plug to my cousin if he might listen to this. He also went to the University of Florida, was a 7-time All-American in track there. So we have a lot of ties that go along with that. So I'm just looking forward to watching that game in particular. And it's kind of the first weekend now where there's always football on. So we'll have some college football on, and then just start going the following week. NFL kicks off. So, I mean, it's a football delight for me. I'll get to watch college and pro ball. And there's always a plethora of games to watch. So I'm looking forward to it.
Did you watch Swamp Kings?
I did watch Swamp Kings. It was pretty cool. And we talked about that a little bit earlier, and I misspoke. And that was at 06, like, yeah, when they beat us, and we were not supposed to lose that game, but they manhandled us. So yeah, so it was kind of hard to relive that highlight, but interesting. That was an interesting documentary.
This is like the greatest weekend of the year. Full disclosure, my wife and my boys, twin boys that are 10, I'll talk about them, on the show from time to time. They love camping. We have a camper, and my wife and I compromise. She always gets Memorial Day and Columbus Day, and I always get 4th of July and Labor Day at home in our backyard to watch college football, because typically that's the Notre Dame opener. Obviously this year was a little different with the week 0, but man, like the opening weekend of college football, even though the slate is not always great, there's always a couple of neutral site games or whatever, but man, it's so exciting that like it's back, and you can sit down at 9 a.m. on a Saturday morning, put College Game Day on, and just sit there till 10 o'clock at night and just like never move. It's the best.
It's the best. One of the things we need to do is we need to tailgate, because I have to admit, as always playing football, I've never really tailgated. So
never
to do one of these shows. No, I've never really tailgated. It's always been a player. Like, you don't get to do those things. Even after playing every time, I've never really just sat and said, let's do the whole full experience, and going out hours beforehand. I've done those show up for like an hour. We're kind of going to do this, but never the full experience. So anybody listening, call me. We'll go to a Bills game and do it, or we'll kind of come to an Ohio State game or a college game and do that.
Well, I can hook us up for the Bills aspect of it. My wife actually shares season tickets with 2 of my closest friends. I don't go because I go to my buddy's house who has the man cave with the 7 TVs. So I'd rather watch every game rather than just the Bills game on Sunday. But we will definitely make that October 1st against the Dolphins. I think we're all going to go. So that one, we can give you the full tailgate experience. I got somebody staying in a camper all weekend. So they're going to park in the camper lot and do that. That'd be a great time.
That'd be awesome. That would be awesome.
That would be awesome. So we're gonna leave it there for episode 1. I hope everybody enjoyed it. We're gonna get into so many more stories and memories that Marlon has of his journey, his career, and obviously a bunch of guests and fun stuff going forward. Any final thoughts, Marlon?
I would just say I hope you guys like this episode. It's something that we want to explore. So the one thing that you can do for us, if you really liked what you heard today, just give us a like so that we can kind of get into your playlist, drop in often so you can hear us, and then give us some feedback. Tell us, hey, Marlon, I don't like when you hold your head this way, or hey, Marlon, you talk too much about Ohio State, or hey, Marlon, take it easy on Notre Dame. They're not that bad. We didn't even get into that team up north and the trouble that they're going through with their coach, which we'll talk about on another episode. But
for sure,
topics that you want to talk about, let us know. We'll definitely try to make sure we cover it.
Absolutely, clearly Marlon's coachable. I've been humbled over the last year getting feedback from the other show that I'm on. Like and subscribe, please. This episode was brought to you by Family Care Physical Therapy. My buddy owns it. There's 3 physical therapy clinics in the Buffalo region. He takes great care of his patients. Thank you to him for his support and make the show possible. Thanks to the guys on Cover One for being gracious enough to let us host the show on here. And hopefully everybody will tune in next week. See you, Marlon.
See ya.